Divorced women. How did karma play out when he left you for someone younger? Story 1. He left in January, right after our 20th anniversary, for the 24-year-old trainer from his gym. By April, we were in court. He'd sworn he was basically broke, that my request for temporary support was outrageous, that the condo and the boat were underwater. His lawyer smirked like this was a formality. Then the subpoena landed on his side business, the consulting LLC he'd opened 2 years earlier. The bookkeeper sent everything: ledgers, invoices, even the Slack export. I watched the judge's eyebrows climb as she read line items labeled Wellness Retainer A. The monthly retainer matched the younger woman's rent down to the cent. There were also equipment reimbursements, with emojis in the memo line. The judge didn't have to guess what kind of equipment my attorney asked for a recess, and called the trainer, who, to everyone's surprise, actually showed. In a neat blazer and trembling voice, she confirmed he'd told her to invoice the LLC so I wouldn't steal her apartment with the divorce. She thought it was normal. He'd said everyone did it. When my attorney asked how he paid for Cabo, she said, "Company Amex." He told me his wife didn't mind. She was happy for us. The courtroom gasped. I didn't. The judge ordered temporary support, backdated, plus my legal fees. Then she turned to him. "You hid income. You use marital funds to subsidize an affair. That's dissipation." She scheduled a sanctions hearing and hinted at contempt. His jaw worked. No sound came out. 2 weeks later, he tried to refinance the boat to make the payment. The bank declined. Apparently, the underwater debt didn't exist. He'd just stopped paying. The marina impounded it. He texted me at midnight, "Can we talk?" I ignored it. The next day, the trainer DM'd me, apologizing, asking if I needed her messages for the sanctions hearing. I said yes. On the morning of that hearing, my lawyer slid a printout across the table. His Slack, bragging that he'd parked $70,000 in crypto where family court can't sniff it. The judge didn't raise her voice. "You will liquidate what remains." Today, when he said he couldn't, the trainer lifted her hand. He showed me the seed phrase so I could check it on his iPad. She read it out, calm as a bank teller. We watched the balance appear on the clerk's screen. He came to court to prove I was greedy. He left signing a cashier's check under oath, while the girl he chose over me recited his password to the state. That was the day I stopped believing in karma as an idea. It's just truth. Eventually handed a microphone. Story 2. I'm the kid. 17 when Dad left Mom for Mia, 26, lashes like butterfly wings and a tote bag that said girl boss. Dad insisted we all blend families at my graduation dinner. He booked a private room with a slideshow of my baby photos and made Mia wear white. Mom showed up in navy and a tired smile. Dad opened with a toast about new beginnings and how he hoped I'd embrace change at college. I had mine ready on note cards, but I didn't need them. I had my phone. I started by thanking Mom for building my science fair volcano at 2 a.m., for teaching me how to drive stick, for sitting on the floor when the couch springs broke and we didn't have money to fix them. Then I said I wanted to thank Dad for teaching me something else. Metadata. Mia's smile wobbled. I airplayed my photos to the restaurant TV. Up came a picture from Dad's camera roll. 2 cappuccinos, 1 manicure, a receipt tucked under the saucer. The timestamp was a Tuesday last October, when he'd told Mom he was at the dentist. I swiped. A hotel mirror selfie, his wedding ring off, her bracelet reflected. Location data pinged downtown, 3 blocks from my school. I swiped again. A Life 360 route that left our house at 5 a.m., paused outside Mia's apartment for 42 minutes, then continued to his work trip. The room went quiet except for someone's fork hitting a plate. Grandpa looked down at his napkin. Dad said, "Honey, this isn't..." And I held up a hand. I told him I'd kept the receipts because I didn't want to choose between parents. I wanted to choose truth. I told him counseling was an option. He chose a hashtag. Mia whispered, "We didn't want to hurt you," like that mattered. Mom squeezed my knee under the table, and it steadied me. I said my last thank you to Dad for paying my phone plan so I could export the data. My college essay was about integrity. He'd given me the best material. Grandma stood, leaned on her cane, and announced that the graduation trip fund they'd set aside would go to the household that stayed. Dad opened and closed his mouth like a fish. Mia's tote bag slid off her chair with a thump. On Monday, I went to the courthouse with Mom to file to change my last name to hers. The clerk asked for the reason. I told her, documentation. When Dad texted later, "You're punishing me," I sent him one photo. The cappuccinos. I wrote, "I'm graduating, not punishing. Karma is just extra credit story 3. I worked 2 cubicles over from Ethan for 8 years. He was our golden boy VP numbers guy, charming, the one who closed every deal with a wink. He left his wife for Kayla, a new account associate, half his age and exactly his type. Bright, ambitious, and oblivious to office politics until they aren't. HR posted a "no fraternization in reporting lines" reminder the same week Kayla's title changed to brand liaison, conveniently placing her under a vendor contract Ethan managed. Everyone pretended not to notice. I keep spreadsheets for fun. I notice everything. The invoices from that vendor started arriving with round numbers and vague descriptions. Strategic ideation, activation synergy. I asked finance if we had deliverables. They shrugged. Ethan told procurement to trust the process. Kayla began showing up in head-to-toe designer on a junior salary. In Slack, Ethan said the contract was mission critical. He also said, "Don't put this in email," so often it felt like a script. Then Kayla's Instagram went from brunch pics to soft launches at hotels we hadn't booked. A junior analyst sent me a DM. "Isn't that the vendor's suite?" In the background of a boomerang, I saw our unreleased mock-ups on the wall. I filed a quiet internal audit request, attached the screenshots, and waited. 3 weeks later, the audit team rolled in quiet as librarians. They matched Ethan's calendar to vendor invoices, cross-referenced Slack DMs he thought were disappearing, pulled the NDA he'd misplaced, and asked Kayla for her company laptop. She cried in the conference room. He called me a traitor under his breath. HR fired him for cause on a Friday at 4:58 p.m. The board chair used the word self-dealing. Kayla got a stern talk and a transfer. Over the weekend, Ethan posted a selfie captioned, "Brighter days ahead," with a sunset emoji. On Monday, our CEO announced a new ethics training program designed by, wait for it, an outside consultancy. The contact person? My former colleague's ex-wife, a CPA who'd launched a compliance firm after he left. I sat in the front row of her kickoff session. She didn't look at Ethan. He wasn't there. But she did look at the slide showing sample red flag memos. One matched his exactly. After the session, she thanked me by name for being the kind of coworker who reads line items. I told her I just like tidy columns. The twist came at quarter's end. The contract she won to clean up our mess was 3 times the value of the one Ethan funneled to the vendor. He used company money to impress someone younger. His ex used his mess to build a business that now bills our board. That, to me, is karma with immaculate bookkeeping. Story 4. I'm the younger woman. You don't have to like me, just hear me. I was 26, washed up on the far side of an eating bar shift, when he slid onto a bar stool and said I reminded him of a song. He wore a wedding ring and a story about a dead marriage. He said he'd leave when the time was right. He left within 2 months and told everyone it was for love. I believed it because I needed to. He moved me into a place with west-facing windows and told me not to worry about the lease. The LLC covered it. He bought me a laptop for my brand and asked me to post photos that made his ex look old. There was a sick thrill to it being chosen. Then choices turned into chores, hiding Venmo memos, deleting calendar invites, keeping a separate suitcase in my trunk in case the kids were around. One night I borrowed his iPad for a recipe and opened the wrong notes file. It wasn't a journal, it was a plan. Phase 1, shift assets to crypto. Phase 2, convert to cash via Kayla's account. Phase 3, claim reduced income. He'd labeled me a phase. Next to my name was liability if remorseful. Underlined. I took screenshots. I reached out to his ex with hands shaking so hard I typed my number wrong twice. She called anyway. She didn't scream. She said, "Thank you for telling me. How would you feel about telling a judge?" I wore the same blazer to court that I'd worn to my first real job interview. I told the truth and watched the way it landed. His lawyer deflated. The judge's posture softened toward the woman he'd left. The bailiff shifted like he could breathe again. When I walked past his ex in the hallway, she said, "You didn't have to do that." I said, "I did. I was the product and the pipeline." Afterward, he called me names I won't repeat. He said I ruined his life. I moved out of the west-facing windows and into a studio with a view of a brick wall and the freedom to sleep. A month later, his daughter asked if I could come to her soccer game. I stood next to his ex on the sideline. We shared a blanket. The girl scored a goal and ran to the fence, not to him, to us. People say karma is cosmic. Sometimes it's manual. Sometimes it's a woman half your age handing the truth back to the woman you tried to erase. If you need me to be a villain, fine. But I was also the witness. I was the one who opened the note he thought I'd never read. I was the phase that refused to complete. Story 5. I'm her best friend. The one who sat on her kitchen floor when he left and ate stale pretzels and said we'd survive this. I didn't plan to go to his father's funeral, but her hand shook when she asked. So I put on black and went. His family loved appearances. The church smelled like lilies and secrets. He arrived late, younger fiancé on his arm, sunglasses inside, grief curated. He didn't look at us. She didn't look at anyone. After the hymns, the pastor invited the family to a private room for the will reading. I waited in a pew and scrolled my phone until I saw her text. Come. So I did. The lawyer read in a boring drone until it wasn't boring at all. To my daughter-in-law, who fed me soup when I could no longer lift a spoon, the letter said, I leave the house you made a home. The fiancé's mouth fell open. He sat up straight. That's a mistake, he said. The lawyer shook his head. There was a clause. The house transferred upon death, contingent not on blood, but on care. She met the contingency with casseroles and midnight laundry. He did not. Then came the trust for the grandchildren, a distribution schedule tied to milestones, school, apprenticeships, first businesses. His name didn't appear as trustee. His sister's did. The fiancée slid her sunglasses higher, as if the light had changed. He tried to argue, to make grief into cross-examination. The lawyer read a final paragraph from the old man, written in a shaky hand that still hit hard. Son, we all get to choose who we want to impress. You chose strangers. She chose family. This house belongs to family. Silence followed, heavy as the mahogany table. On the way out, he cornered her near the coat rack and said she should do the right thing and sell him the house. She looked past him at a photo of his parents on their wedding day and said softly, I already did. I stayed. He laughed like she'd made a joke, then saw that she hadn't. Outside, the sky threatened rain and then kept its promise. We walked to her car under one umbrella, the fiancé's mascara tracking down in gray lines behind us. As we reached the curb, his sister jogged up, breathless, and pressed a key into my friend's palm. Mom wanted you to have the garden, she said. She wrote instructions. Tomatoes on the south wall. Karma didn't humiliate him in public. It planted itself in a backyard he thought he'd inherit, in soil she'd turned by hand while he was learning a stranger's favorite wine. He drove away angry. We drove home with a key and a reason to buy seeds. Story 6. I was the florist at his vineyard wedding, the man who'd left my friend after 15 years to marry a woman with a champagne voice and glitter eyeliner. My friend came only to drop off their son and sit in the last row like a courtesy you perform for the sake of peace. I kept my head down and fussed with peonies. Then Grandma came in, the groom's grandmother, small as a sparrow and sharper than she looked. The bride walked the aisle in lace and a ring that threw prisms across the barrels. My friend went pale. I knew that ring. An heirloom my friend wore every Thanksgiving, the one his mother had promised would stay in the women of the family. He'd taken it when he moved out. For appraisal, he'd said. and never brought it back. They reached the vows. The officiant asked for rings, and she extended her hand. Grandma stood up without waiting for anyone, cane tapping like a metronome. "That ring," she said, clear as a church bell. The violinist stopped mid-bow. The bride smiled, confused. "Isn't it beautiful?" she said. "He said it was his grandmother's?" "It is," Grandma said. "And it belongs to the woman who fed me soup when I forgot my own son's birthday." She turned to my friend in the back pew. "It belongs to you, dear." The groom hissed something about timing and "we'll sort it later." Grandma ignored him. She produced a framed black-and-white photo from her tote, herself as a nurse in 1952, the same ring on her finger. "My mother said this ring is for the woman who keeps the family together when the men behave like fools," she said. The room laughed, then went silent because the bride had started to cry. "I didn't know," the bride whispered. "He told me his ex didn't want it." She slid the ring off with shaking fingers and walked, veil trailing, mascara catching, down the aisle past the groom's sputtering. She didn't hand it to him. She crossed to the back row and pressed the ring into my friend's palm. "I won't start with a lie," she said. "Not even a pretty one." The officiant closed the book. "We'll take a brief pause," he said, but everyone knew the moment had already happened. The groom reached for the bride's hand. She didn't give it. Grandma sat beside my friend and laced their fingers together. "Welcome back to the family," she murmured. The sun kept shining on the vineyard, but the photographs from that day looked colder than December. Except one, a candid of my friend in the last pew, thumb over the ring, finally warm. Story 7. He left me for a second violinist in our city orchestra's Young Artists program, a woman who could make a G major glisten. "I need someone who understands my art," he said, as if the years I budgeted and cooked and ironed tux shirts weren't a devotion of their own. I kept my mouth shut and went back to work. On scales, on etudes I'd shelved when we married, on the calluses that mean you didn't quit. The symphony announced an opening for Principal Second. It would be a blind audition, screen up, carpet laid to mask heels, all the tricks to keep bias out. He told mutual friends he had it locked, that his protege would land assistant and they'd be a power couple seated 2 stands apart. I registered under my maiden name and booked a slot at 9:40 a.m. Backstage smelled like rosin and coffee. Behind the screen you have nothing but your bow arm and your breath. The committee asked for Brahms, then sight reading, then a brutal little excerpt that always exposes lazy shifts. I channeled every night I ate alone while he rehearsed. Every time he said my vibrato was provincial. I didn't play to punish him. I played to prove I existed outside the outline he drew around me. 3 candidates remained. The stage manager whispered numbers, not names. We played the same passage 3 times. On my last run, I took a chance on the tiniest rubato, a bloom on the phrase like light pushing through leaves. The chairwoman exhaled audibly. "Thank you," she said. After lunch, they dropped the screen. The chairwoman read the winning number, and then my name. My ex was in the hall with a congratulatory speech lifted from a TED Talk. It died in his mouth. The young violinist looked stricken, then relieved, the way you do when a burden you didn't earn gets lifted. At the first rehearsal with me in the principal chair, he tried a joke about how sleeping with the first stand didn't pay off this time. Laughter didn't come. The conductor tapped his baton. "We're here to make music, not metaphors," he said, then counted off the overture. We sounded better than we had in years. Afterward, the young violinist approached me in the parking lot. "I'm glad it was you," she said. "I thought I had to be his story to have a career." She looked down at her shoes. "I think I'm going to audition in another city." He left for someone younger who could mirror his myth. Karma was a curtain, and when it dropped, he had to hear what we all heard, that art doesn't bend to who you're sleeping with. It bends to who shows up with a tuned instrument and a spine. Story 8. Our cul-de-sac runs on 2 things: group chats and lawn gossip. He moved 2 blocks over with a yoga instructor half his age and a leased truck with an exhaust that sounded like a leaf blower got drunk. He posted thirst traps from the gym and blessed dad captions with our neighborhood hashtag. He wanted to be seen. "I'm the lady with the porch swing and the spreadsheet for block parties. Also, the Ring camera that catches everything." On a Saturday in June, he took his boys during my friend's custody weekend for bonus time. The younger woman filmed from the truck as he towed the kids on a skateboard behind an e-bike, whooping, "No helmets." She posted it to her fitness account with a "Cool Dad Energy" caption and the house numbers in full view. The video clocked 30,000 views by dinner, and then the comments arrived. A teacher recognized the street. A paramedic wrote about skull fractures. Someone tagged the city's Vision Zero account. I DM'd my friend and told her not to watch it. She watched it anyway and cried into my azaleas. "He'll say I'm overreacting," she said. "He'll say it was safely controlled." 2 days later, a city letter hit his mailbox. Reckless endangerment citation, thanks to a pilot program that uses citizen-submitted footage. He posted a rant about nanny states and bitter exes. The yoga instructor replied with a heart emoji. The group chat swirled. At the next custody mediation, he arrived in a polo shirt and confidence. My friend arrived with a binder, the video downloaded, the comments printed, the city letter highlighted, and a map of where a kid had been hit last year on the same street. My map, I put it in because facts matter. The mediator watched the clip twice and asked one question. Where were the helmets? He said the boys didn't want to look lame. The mediator looked at my friend and said, I recommend temporary restrictions on recreational transport until safety measures are in place. Translation: no e-bikes, no skateboards, no look-at-me stunts. He exploded in the parking lot, yelling that we'd ruined his brand. The yoga instructor hissed that I was a neighborhood spy. I told her I was a neighbor who likes children's skulls intact. The punchline came a week later. The city's safety program used his clip, blurred faces, visible license plate, as a PSA in a workshop at the boys' school. He had to sit in the back row while the principal asked, "What choices make you a safe role model?" Then she handed out helmet vouchers. The younger woman kept her sunglasses on indoors. He left to be the cool dad with the cool girl. Karma was a municipal memo, a group chat, and a 12-year-old raising his hand to say, "Can we talk about gravity?" Story 9. I'm the younger woman's older sister, the one who signed her up for swim lessons and got the call when she got her first parking ticket. I wanted to like him. He was generous at first, the kind of generous that leaves a taste of metal in your mouth. Dinners, designer boots, a statement wallet she wished into existence, and he conjured from a trunk like a magician. I also run numbers for a living, so when she asked me to co-sign a tiny bridge loan for a joint venture, my stomach dropped. The lender was a glossy startup with an app and predatory terms. He'd convinced her to use her excellent credit to build her business profile, while he temporarily kept his debts off the books for mediation. My sister thought it meant partnership. I knew it meant pawn. I didn't scream. I asked to see the documents. There it was in black and white. She was primary, he was authorized user. The collateral and engagement ring he claimed was bought in cash. He'd placed the car she was driving in her name, too, with an insurance policy she couldn't afford if he ghosted. I called the lender, froze the application, then drove to my sister's apartment with iced coffee and a folder. He came home halfway through my explanation and called me a jealous spinster. It was almost funny. I asked him why his credit report showed 3 recent inquiries from pawn shops. He told me I had no right to snoop. I told him I had a duty. At their engagement party, string lights, charcuterie-like art, he stood to give a toast about choosing joy. I interrupted, which is rude, and I regret nothing. I said, "Before we choose joy, can we choose informed consent?" Then I projected the loan terms on the side of the garage. He sputtered about fake news. The lender logo sat there inert and damning. My sister's face crumpled. She took off the ring and set it on the cheese board like a peppercorn. "Is this collateral?" she asked. He didn't answer. She turned to me and asked if we could call the credit bureaus that night. We did. We placed freezes and fraud alerts, called the dealership, and filed a complaint with the state. He texted me from a new number the next day to say I'd ruined his life. I told him I'd saved my sister's. The twist: 2 months later, my sister took a job, bookkeeping, at a nonprofit legal clinic that helps women unwind financial abuse. Guess who walked in for help? Cheeks hollow, credit scorched. his ex-wife. I sat in the waiting room while my sister helped her dispute a debt he'd slipped into her name. When they finished, the ex hugged me and said, "Thank you for loving your sister loud." Karma didn't clap back on Instagram. It sat at a laminate desk and dialed customer service until the hold music stopped. Story 10. He took the dog when he left, like he was splitting assets at random. Couch to me, coffee table to him, dog to him, because she likes me more. Her name is Juniper, a rescue with a biscuit obsession and a nervous leg twitch in her sleep. He said I was too busy, that she'd be happier with a calmer energy. He posted her on his new girlfriend's TikTok in matching bandanas. I stopped watching for my sanity and then broke that rule because grief is nosy. Our neighborhood put on a summer fair with a free microchip clinic in the park. I went with a friend to hand out water cups and pretend my life wasn't smaller. He came with the girlfriend and Juniper, whose bandana said "Girl Dad" like the universe had a sense of humor. I hid behind the bake sale table until Juniper saw me and did the sound she makes that's halfway to singing. Dogs are terrible at pretending. "Don't," he said, tugging her leash, like a command could erase history. The volunteer vet tech waved us over. "Want to check her chip?" she asked, cheerful. He shrugged. The scanner beeped. The number popped. The tech typed it into the registry and read the file. "Registered owner. My name," she said. "Backup contact. The rescue." He said there'd been an update. There hadn't. The rescue rep was at the next table selling T-shirts. She came over, hugged Juniper like an old friend, and pulled out the adoption contract. Clause 7. No transfer without rescue approval. Clause 8. In dispute, the dog's best interest governs. I had clips of Juniper asleep across my ankles, veterinary bills in my name, and the adoption day photo where she tucked her nose into my neck like we'd known each other in another life. The girlfriend whispered, "We can share." And I believed her because kindness sometimes leaks even when you're in the wrong story. He insisted the contract was a suggestion. The rescue rep shook her head. "It's binding," she said. "And we always side with the person who did the 3 a.m. diarrhea bath." The crowd laughed the way crowds do when someone tries to bully a dog rescue. We mediated on a park bench. He said I was weaponizing paperwork. I said I was honoring a promise I signed with a trembling hand and a rescue volunteer's pen. The rescue offered to take Juniper back if we couldn't agree. He blanched at the optics. We agreed to a structured transition, supervised exchanges at the rescue until the microchip transfer cleared. The girlfriend brought biscuits and asked for Juniper's bedtime routine. He didn't come to the last handoff. When the scanner beeped my name, I cried so hard the tech handed me a whole box of tissues. He left me for someone younger and tried to keep the one creature who never lied. Karma had 4 paws and a microchip. She also had a GPS tag now, and a spot on my couch, and a bedtime song that ends with, "We came home, June. We came home." Story 11. The night the river came up over the curb, my phone screamed that amber siren tone you only hear in movies. He'd left me 6 months earlier for a 25-year-old who lived in a basement Airbnb 3 blocks from the water. It was his weekend with the kids. He texted, "We're fine, boys asleep." Then he posted a boomerang of cocktails, paper umbrellas, neon. The address tag put him miles away on higher ground. The city pushed out a map. "Evacuate basements along Mill Street." I stared at the circle around her house. The one he'd bragged had industrial chic pipes that rattled at 3 a.m. I called. Straight to voicemail. I called the younger woman. She answered, breathless. "It's rising," she said. "Your older one keeps asking where the pump is." I told her where the breaker was, where the plastic bins with the emergency kit were, because I'd packed them. She fumbled with the latch. Water sloshed. "He's not answering," she whispered. I drove through water that licked the doors and found them standing on the stairs, flashlight between small hands, basement a gray soup where a playpen used to be. We waited out. My younger tripped. I shoved him onto my hip and felt the weight like every year I'd carried him in grocery lines and doctor's offices. The girlfriend cried and apologized and kept whispering, "He told me not to bother you." At home, I stripped wet clothes, counted toes, made cocoa. At 2 a.m., he called. My phone died, he said. I said, the cities didn't. By morning, neighbors had posted drone footage. Mill Street, a canal, our kids visible in a freeze frame on my stoop under my old university sweatshirt. Commenters wrote, Mom of the Year, and where was Dad? I didn't answer. I opened the custody app and filed for a safety review. At the hearing, he wore a suit that looked like a defense. He said, it was an unprecedented weather event. The judge looked at the footage, at the city warning, at my emergency kit inventory. She asked the younger woman a single question. Who did you call? The girlfriend swallowed hard. Her, she said. She told me where the breaker was. The judge adjusted custody, adding conditions about basements, weather alerts, alcohol, and phones. He looked at me like I'd set the storm in motion. I hadn't. I'd only learned where the breaker lived. The younger woman texted me after, I'm moving. Then, I'm sorry. Then, if the kids want the flashlight, I can bring it. I picked it up myself. The older one clicked it on and off, testing the beam. It still works, he said. So do we, I told him, and meant it more than I ever had. Karma that week wasn't thunder. It was paperwork, and a judge who understood flood maps. Story 12. I'm the condo board secretary, which is to say, I know everyone's business, but only because they send it to my inbox. He left his wife for a Pilates instructor and moved her into 5C, a unit he'd been renting out for years. He'd lectured us at every annual meeting about personal responsibility and pushed through a rule about late fees that was so strict, even the treasurer winced. If you can't pay on time, he'd said, you can't live here. Then the assessments hit for the roof. Shingles curling like potato chips, leaks blooming in the stairwell. He emailed to temporarily waive fees for owners in transition. We all read that as himself. The ex-wife appeared at the next meeting she hadn't attended in a decade, in a trench coat and good boots, holding a folder that said, Bylaws in Tabbed Glory. She flipped to the section he'd authored 2 years prior, the one with his name typed proud at the bottom, and read aloud the sentence about late fees being mandatory without exception. The room made that low hum people make when the plot turns. He said, let's be reasonable. She said, let's be consistent. The vote wasn't close. The assessment stood. The late fees stood. Then the plumber discovered the washer in 5C was illegally installed, drain tied into the kitchen line, no permit. The instructor had posted laundromat-free life on TikTok. Our super recognized the backsplash. We issued the violation. He argued we were targeting him. We sent the video's public link with a smile. He wrote a 600-word email about witch hunts. We replied with a 6-line invoice. When the lien notice went out for unpaid assessments plus fines, he threatened to sue the association. The ex-wife cleared her throat. If you go after the building, she said calmly, you go after me. I own 4B. A few heads turned. We hadn't known she'd kept her unit after the divorce. She'd stayed quiet while he puffed. He paid the lien 3 hours later. The twist came at the next annual meeting. We needed a new board president. He nominated himself, of course, with a speech about vision. The treasurer nominated the ex-wife. She declined. Then she nominated the kindergarten teacher from 3A, who'd been patching roof tarps between lesson plans and had a spreadsheet laminated in her tote. The vote wasn't close. On her first day, the new president hung a sign in the lobby. Quiet hours, roof repair schedule, community garden sign-up. The ex-wife brought seedlings. He brought nothing. Karma wasn't a car getting booted or a scandal in the hallway. It was paying the late fee you designed while your ex waters tomatoes on the roof you insisted we couldn't afford. Story 13. I run a tiny food blog that reviews farmers markets and pop-ups. The week he left her for a barista with a neck tattoo, my traffic exploded because the city discovered her bread. She sold loaves from a folding table, scored hearts, blistered crusts, crumb like a daydream. In a post, I called it a map back to yourself, and she taped it to her canopy with blue painter's tape. People lined up. He rolled up too, in a truck he'd never used to haul anything, and scowled like bread owed him loyalty. He once co-owned the cafe where she baked overnight. He told anyone who'd listen he'd taught her everything. He sent a cease and desist claiming the sourdough starter was joint property. He demanded she hand over his share. She wrote back with a photo of the jar and a post-it. She's 17 years old. She predates you. He filed in small claims anyway. The judge asked for proof of ownership of a jar of living flour. He had emails. She had an index card from 2007 in her grandmother's handwriting. To keep a starter alive, you must feed it like a stubborn hope. The courtroom laughed, then hushed because his lawyer stood to pass out lab reports. No joke, claiming his version of the starter matched hers. She leaned over to me afterward and whispered, "He took a spoonful when I wasn't looking." I believed her. He announced a competing stall, original house starter, authentic recipe. He brought a sous vide machine. He brought a ring light. He brought a woman who filmed him saying the word artisanal like a threat. On opening hour, he sliced into a loaf and the knife squealed across a gummy center. People glanced at my table, at hers, then stepped into her line. He offered BOGO, the bread shredded like damp construction paper, and then the twist he'd baked himself, the decoy. Weeks earlier, after he'd shown up at her prep kitchen door just to talk, she'd started keeping 2 jars, one real, one salted like the Dead Sea. He had stolen the wrong culture. The lab match was to a sabotage she created to keep him from siphoning her work. The judge looked at his crystalline loaf that wouldn't rise and her burn-marked forearms and said, "Case dismissed, costs to the defendant." He came to take the mother of her bread. Instead, the market became her proof of life. By fall, she had a leased storefront and a chalkboard with daily loaves. I reviewed the grand opening and cried into a croissant. "You're biased," someone commented. Yes, towards women who build ovens while the person who left tries to steal the flame. Story 14. He liked to say paperwork was my love language until the paperwork didn't love him back. When he left for a junior realtor with a ring light, he changed beneficiaries on everything except the boring stuff. The long-term disability policy through his company HR packet, the one I'd filed when we were still us, because he hated portals. 3 months later, he blew out his knee playing weekend warrior in a men's league that thinks it's the NBA. The surgery was simple. The recovery wasn't. Stairs became mountains. Listings dried up. The younger woman realized commission checks don't arrive just because you light a candle. He filed for disability. A letter came to my mailbox. I was still listed as trustee for any payout for the benefit of minor children. I called HR. They confirmed. I asked a lawyer, if I accept, can he force me to send him an allowance through the kids' number? The policy paid into a trust earmarked for the children's needs. Housing, healthcare, school, not rent on someone else's penthouse. I opened a separate account and thought about braces. He raged. He said I was stealing. I showed him the clause he'd initialed, his initials, not mine, 3 years ago in an online portal he'd begged me to finish. The younger woman posted a story about bitter exes hoarding money meant for healing. My phone lit in solidarity from women who've read fine print at 2 a.m. The comments on her post turned when someone asked, "Isn't the money for the kids?" She deleted it. The emotional punch came quiet. The first tuition bill with paid stamped across the bottom. Our older started community college 2 weeks after his dad's second surgery. The bursar asked if we wanted a receipt for the trustees. I said yes and slid it into a folder labeled Dad's Knee, Our Future. I didn't gloat. I did buy our younger a new pair of cleats he'd outgrown twice in silence. Later, when he'd healed enough to walk to the mailbox, he sent a text. I didn't read it. The policy, I replied. I know. Then, because cruelty is cheap and boundaries are priceless, I added, the kids will send photos from school. And they did. Grinning next to a whiteboard and an acceptance letter tacked with a pushpin to a dorm corkboard. Karma wasn't the injury. That was an accident. Karma was the portal he ignored, and the clause that remembered our children when he didn't. Story 15. I'm the university librarian who runs the plagiarism tutorials no one wants to attend. He's the adjunct who left his wife for a graduate student with a subscriber wall and a lo-fi study playlist. Our campus is small. Gossip is a course without credits. She submitted a thesis that was technically fine, until it wasn't. We use software, sure, but my edge is older. Ear for cadence, eye for habits. Halfway through her literature review, the diction shifts, clinical to baritone bravado. Footnotes go from meticulous to macho. I flag it for the committee. The professor chairing the defense is him. I send my note anyway. He replies with a thumbs-up emoji. At the defense, she sits in a blazer too crisp for the room, hair so polished it reflects the fluorescence. He asks leading questions like he's writing a script for their victory reel. Then Professor Halverson, who has watched students try every trick since dial-up, leans in. "Who is we in Section 3?" he asks. She blinks. He points to a sentence. "We propose a new framework." Her mouth opens. "My boyfriend," she starts, then freezes. The committee follows her gaze to the adjunct in the corner. Silence debuts as the loudest thing in the room. I speak up, gently, because I like to keep us on rails when trains want to jump. "We can adjourn for 5 minutes, I suggest. In the hallway, she leans against the water fountain and whispers, "He wrote parts so I wouldn't stress." She thinks it's kindness. It is a career ender. We reconvene. Halverson sets a printed page on the table, paragraphs lifted wholesale from a conference paper the adjunct presented 3 years ago, now repurposed into her Chapter 2. The adjunct's ears go red. "Common knowledge," he says. Halverson taps the citation page. Know what else is common? Consequences. The committee votes to fail the defense with the option to resubmit after an academic integrity process. The adjunct is removed from the room schedule by the end of the day. HR calls it loss of confidence. He calls it cancel culture. The dean calls it Wednesday. 2 weeks later, the grad student schedules a one-on-one with me. She brings her own coffee and a notebook lined with remorse. We build a plan, independent study, writing center standing appointments, a draft where every we becomes an I. She cries once, then only sniffles. She emails the ex-wife to apologize for helping him cheat at work after he cheated at home. The ex-wife replies with a date stamp, the day she left. "I hope you finish your degree," she writes. Without him, he left to be the mentor in someone else's success story. Karma was watching her become the author of her own work, while he packed his office books into a banker's box labeled MISC. I signed the circulation slip. He didn't meet my eyes. The grad student did. She said, "Thank you for not making me a villain." I said, "Do the citations. Let them make you a scholar." Story 16th April 15th used to be his bragging season. He'd post adulting selfies at the post office like he was one of the few, the proud, the tax compliant. He left me for a 23-year-old content strategist and filed that first spring as head of household from her studio, claimed both kids, and typed my dependent care receipts into his return like he personally paid each daycare bill I'd Venmo'd at midnight. He told me not to make this adversarial. I kept my receipts in a shoebox I labeled Peace. In July, a letter arrived with the windowed envelope nobody wants. Examination notice. He sent me a screenshot with 12 crying, laughing emojis. "They just want clarification," he said. The audit interview fell on a Friday at 9 a.m. I took sick time and showed up with a binder tabbed like a rainbow, school enrollment proof at my address, aftercare contracts in my name, the calendar showing he'd had the kids 4 days out of 30 in the qualifying month. His new girlfriend came in a blazer and nerves, carrying a folder with brand deals and an Amazon list titled Homeschool Ideas. The agent asked her a single question. "Are these your children?" She looked at her shoes. "No," he tried to perform confidence. "We're a modern family," he said, dropping phrases like in-kind support. The agent, a woman who had seen every flavor of hubris, slid a printout across the table. His return side by side with mine. My AGI, my child care credit, his double claim on the same expense. "This is not a negotiation," she said. "This is math." The penalties and interest mounted like Jenga blocks. He pivoted to victim. "She's punishing me," he said. I didn't speak. The agent did. She explained offsets, how overdue support could be satisfied through intercepted refunds and applied to arrears before a dime touched his wallet. She calculated calmly how much of his adulting would now go to the children he posed with but didn't claim the nights for. He tried for a last-minute Hail Mary, sliding photos across the desk. Pumpkin patch, Christmas pajamas. The agent pushed them gently back. "Photos aren't custody," she said, and turned to me. "Do you have documentation for the babysitter in March?" I opened the binder to tab 3 and placed the signed ledger on the table like a trump card I hadn't wanted to need. When we stood to leave, he hissed that I'd weaponized bureaucracy. I almost said that he'd weaponized Instagram. I didn't. The letter came 2 weeks later. Disallowed credits, assessed penalties, refund intercept to me. I used the money to pay for braces and a second-hand laptop for our oldest. He posted a story about toxic exes and government overreach. I posted nothing. Karma didn't clap back. It itemized. Story 17. I'm the younger woman. He called me oxygen during the honeymoon phase, like I was necessary for life and not just his escape hatch. He'd been meaning to update his medical paperwork, he said. His ex loved paperwork and would sign anything. Then his heart misfired on a trail run, shockingly mortal, and the ambulance beat us to the ER by minutes. At registration, I said I was his partner. The nurse said kindly, "Do you have his medical power of attorney?" I shook my head. She made the call. His ex arrived in a cardigan and the kind of face you get from years of swallowing your pride. I expected drama. She walked straight to the consent desk and, without flair, authorized the procedure. No speeches, no conditions, just a signature and a tremor in her hand. I wanted to hate her. I settled for feeling very small. While he was in surgery, a social worker asked about post-op care, stairs, meals, medication refusals. He joked with me that he didn't do instructions. The social worker didn't laugh. The ex slid over a neatly typed schedule with reminders: when to walk him, how to keep him from lifting, the number of the cardiologist who actually answered at 2 a.m. She'd made it. For whoever is with him. That sentence landed like a piano. He pulled through. Awake, groggy, needy in a way that stripped all the Instagram gloss from our life. I set alarms. He silenced them. I tried to coax the pill. He argued about side effects. The third night, he refused the monitor and tore off the leads like stickers. The nurse, a saint, reattached them while I cried in the darkness you only see in hospitals. On discharge, billing rolled a cart up like a fate with wheels. His insurance covered most. The rest was a number I couldn't float. The ex spoke softly to the social worker about a short-term home health nurse. Because he listens to strangers better than he listens to women he loves. The social worker smiled the saddest smile. Back at his apartment, he asked me to heat soup, then criticized how I held the ladle. I could feel the shape of the next decade forming. Me, aging fast. Him, blaming the air. I packed a duffel while he slept, tucking the post-op instructions into his nightstand. Before I left, I texted his ex. He needs someone patient, she wrote back. He needs himself. People want a villain. Sometimes karma is realizing you were almost it. I left my key under the doormat and my pride in the elevator. He called the next morning to say I was cruel. I said, "I watched the woman you left save your life." He hung up. I kept walking. He'd wanted oxygen. He found it in the woman who signed while shaking. I chose air I could breathe.